Welcome once again. It is week 8 of Easy Education. I'm Easy to Chris, and I am hoping to make education easy for you. I realized this week that this podcast is slowly becoming the document that shows my capabilities of growing a beard. And as somebody who has never been able to grow a beard, I'm kind of excited that there is, at the very beginning, I'm clean shaven. And right now I absolutely need to do something with my face. So thank you for joining the process of my facial hair experiments. It makes me so excited that somebody can join along with me. So on that note, we're going to get into what the topic this week was. So week 8, we were covering systems versus willpower, and we were again in James Clear's Atomic Habits. This time we were going through chapters, it says 10 through 12. Realistically, I went through 14 because kind of like last week, we did all of the second law, which was make it obvious. No, make it obvious was the first. Oh goodness, why am I already forgetting? Hold on, let me grab my book. It's easier when you actually have the content there in front of you. So the first law was make it obvious. The second law was make it attractive. That's right. Unlike sweater vests. The third law, which is chapters 11 through 14, I was kind of excited to go through this week, just because I've had the handle Easy to Chris for almost 20 years now. There's a really, really silly failed music project I had when I was a teenager called Easy to Kill, and I was Easy to Chris from Easy to Kill. And even though the music project definitely failed to launch and didn't go anywhere, Easy to Chris stuck because it was easy to remember. And if it's easy to remember, it's easy to Chris. And if it's easy for Chris, it's probably easy for you. And it's been this ongoing joke for 20 years, which is why this whole process is called Easy Education. And I try to make things easy for you. And it's why I say keep it easy at the end of all this. It's all just this silly cohesive thing that I built over 20 years ago, and it's why it just makes sense to me. And the third law in Atomic Habits is make it easy. It makes me so happy. It makes me so incredibly happy because it was actually kind of going through a bunch of concepts that are more refined that I've just been living. I really do believe that the quickest path between point A and point B is a straight line, and that's really the way that humans work, and it's how we operate. We're going to be calorically efficient with the use of our brain power. And if something is challenging, we're less likely to accomplish it than if it's easy. Now, the thing that I had to focus on this week specifically was going through these chapters. Environment shapes the outcome. And the focus of the writing and what this video is this week is why personal change fails in hostile systems. Now, what we're trying to do here is not easy things. At the end of the day, I'm trying to make a podcast. And there are things in my life that I want to be better at that are not easy. That's why I'm not doing them. But if you face some kind of friction point and there's things that are combating you in your ability to do these things, it's going to be an uphill battle the entire time for you to accomplish the things that you're hoping to accomplish. And that's why you want to make it easy. One of the points that it brings up is the 2-minute rule. And I think that this is in chapter 13. But the whole concept of it is when you're trying to do something new, don't take all of it on all at once. And the reason that you don't want to do that is because it's overwhelming. And, the person that you're eventually going to be is capable of those things. But if you're not doing it right now, can you honestly say that you are capable of these things? So the really easy example that the book gives is yoga. All you need to do is 2 minutes of yoga on a daily basis. You don't need to do a 30-minute session of yoga to start a yoga practice. If all it is you going and getting your yoga mat, rolling it out, doing a downward dog and a sun salutation, cool, you did yoga. Do it again tomorrow. Do it again the next day. Do it for 2 minutes. That's all you need to do, is just commit 2 minutes, so that way you can get in the repetition of being able to say that you're actually doing it. So don't say you're making movement towards it. Take action towards the person that you actually want to be. And I think that that's what's really interesting in practice with what this education is trying to provide me for my homework and what it is that I'm trying to accomplish. I know that these first handful of episodes are not that great, but I'm getting them done. And that's the important thing, is I'm going through the repetitions and I'm simply doing them. I'm telling myself that I'm going to do them, and I'm doing them. I'm making the time for them, and I'm committing to it. It's the repetition that really, really matters. And another example that they make is there's a professor who was a photography instructor, and he had a class of students that he was going to grade in 2 different ways. The first half of the class had to be graded on the quantity of the photos that they were taking. And you got 1 point for every photo that you submitted. So if you wanted to get a perfect score, you had to submit at least 100 photos. The other half, they were going to be graded off of the quality and composition of the one photo that they submitted. And when all of this was done, they were trying to figure out who gave the best photos. And you would think that these people who were only needing to submit one would submit their absolute best photo. But in reality, it was the people who submitted 100 photos that had some really good photos. Because at the end of the day, they were the ones that were going out, trying different angles, looking at the way that light was affecting the areas that they were wanting to take a picture of their subject. And they had repetition, opportunities to fail, and new opportunities to succeed. So out of 100 photos, maybe only, 20 of them were good, but of those 20, 5 of them were great. And those 5 that are great are better than that one that the student had to submit when the entire time they're just thinking about, how is it that I'm going to make this happen? How is it that I can wait for the perfect moment? When can I find that golden hour? How can I get my subject perfectly in frame? They're not doing the work. They're only thinking about doing the work. The people who get the repetitions in are the ones that are actually accomplishing things and are learning through failure, trial, and success. Now, I say this a lot in my barbershop. I think the best lessons that I've ever learned in my career are what not to do. And this is one of the biggest pieces of advice that I give to any creative person or anyone new in a career. If you want to learn how to do something, go out and do it. You don't need anyone's permission, and it's much easier to ask for forgiveness than waiting for permission. And if you fail, that's fantastic. You learned something that you shouldn't do. And don't do that again. And then go out and do more things until you learn something else that you probably shouldn't do. Learn what not to do. And eventually you'll learn enough of what not to do that you will gravitate towards the things that you should be doing, and you're just doing that, avoiding all the things that you've learned what not to do along the path. Now, when I put this into the context of this podcast, I have learned a handful of things of what not to do. I think me being a little relaxed right now is me leaning into a lesson. Because in the first couple of times that I was doing this, I was trying to figure out how do I want to present myself? How do I want to be on screen? How do I want others to perceive me? Do I want to be somebody who can be respectable, or somebody that could actually take the place of some kind of educator in some sort? I mean, at the end of the day, I'm just some tattooed millennial who's learning off of the internet. So, there's not really a whole lot that I can speak highly of myself. So maybe I can elevate myself with my appearance. when in reality, that made me not enjoy being in this space. It wasn't authentic. And while I can try and find ways to be able to talk in a way that is more acceptable to many more groups of people than the ones I typically find myself inside of a barber shop, you know, in this space, I really do want the best of me to be what's reflected. But the best of me is, comfy. I'm pretty much going to always be the person that has the fashion that I do. And the idea of me dressing up in slacks and a dress shirt just so that way I can put myself in the mood to do these videos doesn't make any sense. So I realized I'm overthinking it. And that's something that I do pretty regularly is I overthink things and I don't just make it easy. So if it's easy for me to come into this room and do this just comfortable, I'm going to be more comfortable. And it's a lot easier now that I've been doing this for a handful of weeks to be able to actually have this conversation, arguably with myself, in a space that I'm getting more comfortable in, especially if I am more comfortable. So it's all about making things easy and reducing those friction points. And I'll give you an example of something that came up in the shop this week. Now, I've owned a barber shop for going on 9 years now. I've been in the industry since 2015, and one of the things that I do very differently than what I would say a lot of barbershop owners would recommend is I have conversations with people in a pretty candid fashion, I would say. Boise is a fairly blue area, and Idaho is a very red state. And I never really know who is going to be sitting in my chair, what their political leanings are, what their views and values are, what their socioeconomic status is. We have people that are, struggling through college coming in. We have venture capitalist investment tycoons that come in. We have lawyers that come in. We have janitors that come in. We have a little bit of everyone from everywhere in every walk of life. And the thing that I have realized so clearly is I have not walked a mile in anyone else's shoes. And they haven't walked a mile in mine, which means that my expectation that they have the same views and values that I have is so far falsified. It is not a reality. It is not something that I can bank on. And really the only thing that I can do is have conversations with people with pure curiosity in mind. And what I mean by that is I am not trying to bring people to my side of the aisle or my side of the argument, because to me, that's silly. I can never do that. I can share my experience with somebody and they can share their experience with me. But the only way that somebody is willing to share their experience with me is if I'm, one, curious and I'm not judgmental, and two, I'm honestly listening. And this is a way to be able to have really, really good relationship building skills in a barber shop is just approaching any of the conversations with curiosity. And because I approach these conversations with curiosity, I really find that I can lean into the types of conversations that most people want to avoid. I can talk about religion, I can talk about politics, I can talk about mental health issues, and I can talk about things that a lot of men are really, really afraid to talk about with any of the people in their circle out of fear of judgment. And because I'm just simply curious of how this impacts your life, and I'm not making any judgments, I also need to keep a professional behavior about myself because I'm hoping to get paid. I'm hoping that they come back and I continue getting paid and I have a consistent income. But also, I need to be able to have emotional maturity where I can continue providing a service to somebody else where they're getting what they're paying for and the conversation is just gravy on top of everything. Now, I've had mental health issues in the past, and that is no secret to anyone who's been in my shop. But for people who have been in the shop less less frequently than others. I have people I've been cutting for 9 years, and I have people that I've been cutting for 9 weeks. The newer people start to get kind of weird when I ask questions that nobody else has ever asked them before. And it's a navigation game that is really challenging in the beginning. And I'll tell you what, the best thing that I ever did was lose that sense that I'm not supposed to ask this question and just ask it. It's challenging in the beginning, but then the more that you ask that question, the easier it is to have that conversation. And you stumble along the way, you learn, okay, that's a conversation that you and I can't have. We won't go there anymore. But if you come up to me with a view that I oppose, okay, well, let's navigate it. Let's see how it is that you go through here. Now, I genuinely do believe that I have the strong clientele that I do because I have genuine relationships with every single guy that comes into my shop. And yesterday, there was a guy that he and I were talking about a doctor's appointment that I had last week. Now, for context, I'm genuinely terrified of hospitals. I'm truly, truly horrified of hospitals because I had a pretty traumatic experience when I was a kid. I was about 5 years old, and I was in a military hospital because I grew up an Army brat, and they didn't tell me that blood work was going to be done. And unfortunately, the nurse was not as compassionate as a lot of the nurses that are out there nowadays. And she went to take blood from my arm, and as a kid, I instinctively pulled away. And this woman grabbed my arm and went forward as I'm trying to pull back, and we're fighting back and forth. And it caused me to get stabbed multiple times by this syringe, which, unfortunately is what now has made me absolutely terrified of hospitals. So yes, I am one of those heavily tattooed people who is genuinely terrified of syringes. And nurses definitely get a kick out of that every time that I tell them this. Which is what happened about a week ago. I haven't been to a doctor in about 10 years, and I'm turning 40 this year, so I really do want to take my health into consideration and really look to the second half of my life as someone who takes better care of themselves than who I was during the first half of my life. So I go to my new primary care physician, and it's the nurse practitioner, and I'm explaining to her what this experience was, how it is that I hyperventilate when I go into hospitals, how it is that I've had vasovagal responses that trigger as seizures anytime that blood work needs to be done, and how my heart is just elevated being in a hospital. And she said, it sounds to me like you have a PTSD response. And nobody has ever said that to me before, and it was a very weird moment where I was like, huh. That kind of makes sense because I have night terrors all the time, and I have terrible anxiety, and I've never been able to get past this. No matter how kind or how skilled the nurse is, it's just something that I'm gone. So anyways, I'm telling this story to one of my clients who's in the shop yesterday, and he and I are talking about taking care of ourselves and the fact that we're both middle-aged and that we're about to turn 40. And he looks at me and says, I have night terrors too. I just started a medication for him about 2 months ago. The only person who knows about him is my wife. I've never been able to talk to anyone about this before. And he and I had a conversation in an empty barber shop about how our night terrors manifest themselves and how it is that we have to deal with waking up and all of the emotions that were dumped in our unconscious state carried over into our conscious state. And it was a conversation that he wasn't really expecting to have with his barber. And he asked me why am I okay with having these conversations, and what made me want to start having them. And I told them because nobody else does. It's really unfortunate that we live in a world where we don't necessarily have that third space that we used to have. We don't have the ability to have challenging conversations with the people that we actually care about in our lives, because we're all just fed, dopamine drips from a rectangle box that sits in our pocket. And I think one of the reasons that I'm so excited about being able to do this podcast and what I can demonstrate for you is the ability to think critically, and not emotionally, and be able to rationally go through how would you want to learn knowing more about yourself. How is it that you could try and better yourself to be able to build better relationships with those around you? And at the end of the day, I think that I'm in a position, especially at the barbershop, where I can have conversations with people on a very regular basis that is ultimately like a podcast in real life. I have really interesting people that come in to my shop, and the best thing that I can do is learn about them and be curious about them. And the hardest thing for so many other people is having that conversation, but I made it easy because I did it enough times. It's all about the repetition and learning how you can be able to navigate through things. And even with this, like I said earlier, I am doing this on a regular basis so I can learn what is a better way of doing it, and I can learn a lot of what not to do so that way I can navigate through it easier. It didn't need to start out good, it just needed to start out. And if you go back to those first few episodes, it's all done on my webcam. And I went through the path of least resistance. Now, I actually am putting a little bit of time and effort, and I'm a lot more comfortable being able to speak for, 25, 30 minutes alone in a room about one conversation that actually is cohesive, and be able to share with you experiences that might be able to help you benefit. Now, that's how making it easy as a rule I've applied in my life, and I've applied it for many years. I was so excited when I actually realized that make it easy was going to be the concept that I would be focusing on this week, just because I knew it would make a lot of sense to me, and I knew that I would be able to share some kind of experience that was more meaningful in this episode specifically. Now, I'm curious, how would you guys apply the methodology of making something easy? If you're trying to work out more, do you just need to set aside 2 minutes and make it so that way you go and do 2 minutes of push-ups and you did it? Maybe it'll take 2 months, but that 2 minutes isn't enough for you. It's just the thing that starts your excitement, and then you need to continue on after that. Maybe your 2 minutes becomes 20 minutes. Maybe your 2 minutes becomes 2 hours. Maybe it becomes the thing that really motivates you 2 months down the line. Who knows? I would love to hear what you guys plan on doing to making your life easier and being able to apply this methodology to any of the habits that you're trying to set up. So leave comments. Let me know what it is that you plan on doing. If you have any questions on the concepts that I brought up, bring that up too. I'd love to be able to respond to any of them in a future episode. Now, as for tonight, I'm going to be calling it. So what I'd love for you guys to do, if you haven't already, please subscribe. That makes my heart happy. It really does. You can find me on Spotify. I'm on Apple Podcasts as well as Amazon Podcasts. You can even find the video content on YouTube. If you're more interested in reading the shenanigans that I write, it's available on my Substack, which is just Easy to Chris, or you can find both the written and video content on my website, easytochris.com. In the meantime, I really do appreciate you guys paying attention and coming along for this whole journey. And until next time, be well.